Hello, brothers and sisters. Welcome back to the greatest sermon ever preached, where Jesus is systematically exposing the hearts of his audience, the Jewish audience. By using the law and going into the depth of it, he's trying to show them that their righteousness will never get them into heaven. And same for us too, of course. And in that, he's being systematically going through different parts of the law, and sometimes even traditions. Of course, he's not just exposing our ugliness, he's also trying to teach or encourage wannabe disciples to live in a certain way. Now, today he's going to touch on a subject that might not have as much a place of importance for us Christians in 2024, and that's the subject of vows and oath and promises. The Old Testament had vows, because we don't really have that as Christians. At the same time, though, on the flip side, there has been some believers, some groups that have been categorically against anything that's vow, marriage vows, or vows when you go to court, or oath when you go to court, and all these things, because of the words of Jesus. So let's look at what he actually said and try to make sense of it together. We begin. Again, you have heard that it was said to those of old, "You shall not swear falsely, but shall perform to the Lord what you have sworn." He's going back to that same repetition of, it's been said of old. It's something that's been passed down from generation to generation, except he's not going to quote a direct commandment like he did last time. Thou shalt not murder, not commit adultery. No, actually, he says, you shall not swear falsely. This could be reference to don't bear false witness, but then he adds to it that they need to perform what they've said, an oath, a vow. And there were places for vows in the Old Testament. So maybe he's smushing together, as he did before, some of the other parts of the law with the commandment, or maybe he's referring more to a traditional way of understanding things. If you're going to make a promise, you better keep it. Could have been a rabbi teaching. Either way, he's presenting this, and he's going to say, yeah, be careful about that. As usual, he's going to go much deeper. He's going to say, but I said to you, do not take an oath at all, either by heaven, for it is the throne of God, or by earth, for it is his footstool, or by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great king. See, this is where some say Jesus clearly, categorically said, do not take any oath, vows, promises. He said it. Period. Well, technically it's not period, as you can see. It's actually a comma. I'm not trying to make a joke. It says that he's not finished teaching. He doesn't just say, don't make oath. That's it. He then adds to it this idea of by heaven or earth or Jerusalem, and you want to scratch your head saying, what? Why those specific things, heaven, earth, and Jerusalem? Because it was part of a system, a traditional system that existed back then. And we already saw Jesus talk about this way back when we were going through these 7 woes. Right? The 7 things that Jesus was condemning in the teachers of his day. One of them was how they were teaching about vows and oath and stuff like that. We won't look at it, but we at least want to see how he kind of touched on the subject. He would have said that. Woe to you, blind guides, who say, whoever swears by the temple, it is nothing. Whoever swears by the gold of the temple, he is obligated to perform it. Fools and blind, for which is greater, the gold or the temple that sanctifies the gold? And then he continues with other examples. He says that back then, the religious leaders were trying to teach certain, if I could say, things you could swear by that would absolve you if you didn't keep it. If you swore by the temple and you didn't keep your vow, that was okay. But if it was the gold, now that you have to do. So if he said to somebody, okay, let's do a business deal, and if it doesn't work out, I'll pay you back everything you invested in it. And I swear by the temple. Aha, but it's nothing. So if it doesn't work out, I don't have to pay you back. Aha! That was part of their teaching back then, which really exposes how these people are trying to get out of things by their great elaborate oath and promises and vows, but using that little way out. That little catch-22, if you will. They knew which things they could vow to, and it wouldn't be binding. And they would use that. Showing me the evil intent of the heart. How they didn't want to keep their promises. They were just trying to find a way out. And like crossing your fingers behind your back when you say something like we do nowadays. So keeping that in mind, when we come back to this, we start to make sense of it, right? Because this heaven, earth, and Jerusalem were probably some of the ways out that they were using. You can make an oath by heaven. It'll look elaborate. You will look like trustworthy. But if you don't keep it, it's okay. And Jesus says, no, heaven is the throne of God. Same thing for earth, same thing for Jerusalem. You can't use it as a way to convince people to trust you, but it's okay if you don't follow it. Again, evil intent. And Jesus is saying, don't do that. It sounds me more that he's saying, don't have that evil effort to try to get out of things and making elaborate oath for people to trust you, even though you don't want to fulfill it at all. Don't do that. Don't use ways to manipulate people. He gives another example. He says, and do not take an oath by your head, for you cannot make one hair white or black. And this makes you think of when we say, if I'm lying, may God strike me dead. And you see, he didn't. Well, you can't be sure that God, in his perfect kindness and righteousness, will decide to still give you life even though you're lying. The same way if you say, I swear on my mother's grave, if I'm lying, may my mother be struck dead. She's not, therefore I'm not lying. Again, God decides life and death. You can't. That's what I think about when I think of this idea of swear by your head, but really you can't do anything to yourself. You can't change anything about your life. So you're making elaborate things, saying elaborate oath, trying to convince people, but there's nothing you can do to prove should be trustworthy, trusted or not trusted. This is where Jesus now comes to apply. But again, we have to take note that Jesus is trying to show the evil intent of people, using this great verbal oath and promises, great elaborate expression of heaven and earth, and my life is on the line here, and I will keep my promise. Well, you don't actually want to. Really shows the evil of the heart, right? Which is what Jesus is trying to do. But this is when he then gives a certain application, saying, let what you say be simply yes or no. Anything more than this comes from evil. What comes from evil? The intent of trying to convince people with elaborate expressions and oaths and vows while you were lying and covering it up the whole time. That comes from evil. That's, I believe, what is Jesus saying here. He's not saying that if you made a promise you don't keep it, you're evil. I've heard that before. If you make a promise, I'll come help you move, and you don't come that day, you're evil. So you came from evil. I don't think that's the point. I think it's really this intent of using all these expression and vows and oath to try to convince people you're trustworthy when you're not. That's evil. Now, is Jesus therefore saying we should never make any kind of oath or vow or promises point blank? Well, no. No, for two reasons. The first being, as we saw the context, he's using expressions that were known back then that were used to get out of it. He's saying, don't do that. Don't try to be tricky and sneaky like that. Don't make those kinds of oath, if I could put it like that. So the context. But secondly, take note of what he said though. What should we be doing? That your yes, simply yes or no. Or as James would say, your yes be yes or your no be no. No, there's a sense where you do still make a promise. Yes, I will help you. Yes, I promise to marry you and cherish and care for you for the rest of my life. Or no, I will not lie in court right now. So I swear on the Bible. There's a place for that. Your no be no, and your yes be yes. There's still a verbal promise being used, but nothing elaborate or great. So no, Jesus is not saying don't make any kind of oath per se, but he is saying keep your word though. Now stuff can happen, yes, but for the most part, you committed yourself. You say yes, you do. You say no, you do. That's the point here. See, now things can happen, and I think it's important to think of that. Think of Paul. Paul, who in First Corinthians at the end of the book says that if he has enough time, he's going to come visit them after he is in Ephesus, I think. When he passes by Macedonia, he'll try to make a little detour if he has enough time. He really wants to come for a long trip, not some kind of high and by. But he didn't come. And some of the people in Corinth, some of the people who were against Paul, were saying, see, he doesn't keep his promises. And in Second Corinthians, he tries to argue that, it wasn't like I was trying to say yes and say no at the same time. I had talked about coming for a good, strong visit. I couldn't do that. Circumstances didn't permit that. Well, that's why I didn't come. My yes is yes. My no is no. And the I'll try is I'll try. So there's a place for that too. We shouldn't be too quick of saying, you said yes and you didn't do it. But again, the whole point is when you say you're going to do something, you try to do it. If you say you didn't do that, then you shouldn't try to convince people that you should be trusted. They should just, because of your character, say, I believe him. He said no, he didn't do it, then I believe him. So hopefully this has been encouraging and a blessing to you, brothers and sisters.